And hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Rich Sports Talk, your home for all the latest and greatest on the New York Jets. We will have plenty more videos this offseason, including free agency previews and reactions, NFL mock drafts, and draft analysis. And if you have ideas for videos that you would like to see or content discussed, please put it in the comments if you're joining us after the live stream. Make sure to give us a subscribe so you don't miss the next live stream, and also put your questions below, and we will answer them in a future video. We were back last week with the hiring of Nathaniel Hackett, and of course, that started the speculation about Aaron Rodgers to the New York Jets. That has only gotten stronger as multiple reports have come out saying that the Packers are willing to move off of Aaron Rodgers this offseason. And this is a huge discussion that we are going to get into and more. So make sure you give us a like. We will get to your questions in a little bit. But I thought it was very interesting because I've been someone that's been saying, look, I would like Derek Carr here. And if the Jets get Derek Carr, and there's been reports that they've also been exploring Derek Carr, I wouldn't hate it. Personally, I think in some ways there are some positives to it. You probably don't have to give up nearly as much. You can probably get him on a little bit better of a deal. But the more I was thought about it, I was watching the AFC Championship game like we all were yesterday. And it was clear to me that while Derek Carr will definitely, in my opinion, help end this team's postseason drought. I feel if the Derek Carr's on the Jets next year, the Jets are a wild card team probably. But the more I thought about it, the more clarity came to mind. Because what was the matchup yesterday? Well, it was Joe Burrow and it was Patrick Mahomes. What about the week before? Well, it was Joe Burrow and Josh Allen. You look at the AFC right now and the amount of great quarterbacks there are, it's pretty daunting. And while Derek Carr, I really believe, can get this team to double-digit wins in the playoffs, the question is, can he get this team to a Super Bowl? And I think the harsh reality is I think the Jets can make a run, but I don't think that they will have enough to overcome a Patrick Mahomes or a Joe Burrow. They are the standard. There is a reason that they've played each other deep in the playoffs in back-to-back years. There's a reason why they have been the two quarterbacks that have represented the AFC the last 2 years. And while the Jets have a great defense, they need a quarterback, and you need a quarterback to be successful. So seeing all of this come out and seeing that the Packers are willing to move off of Rodgers at this point, I do think Rodgers will be traded because there was a big difference last offseason to this offseason. Nothing really got out from the Packers side. And the biggest comment they made was, well, basically the new contract for Aaron is a bunch of one-year deals, not a 3-year deal. But it's funny how all of a sudden, even before we're in the Super Bowl, all this is starting to leak out about potential trade, how they're open to a trade. Actions, I've always said on this channel, speak a lot louder than words. And when stuff like this leaks out, it's for a reason. People don't want info getting out unless it's for a reason. And I think the reason is the Packers are softening the blow. They are opening it up early because this is probably going to happen. And they don't want to just surprise their fan base. Don't get me wrong. I still think the majority of their fan base will not be happy with a move off of Aaron Rodgers, but they are basically going to soften the blow and say, well, you can't be surprised because this has been out there and this has been leaking. It also creates a little bit more of a market. How much will it cost to get Aaron Rodgers? I don't think it will take 2 firsts, but I do think it will take significant draft capital. But you watch that game between Burrow and Mahomes, and you don't need just a good quarterback now in the AFC. You need a great quarterback if you are going to want to get to the Super Bowl. And realistically, I think that there's only 2 options. I think that the 2 options for the Jets are Lamar Jackson or Aaron Rodgers. But for the time being, Aaron Rodgers is likely the best fit. Number 1, he fits the system, is playing the system under Nathaniel Hackett. Number 2, despite the massive contract he has and despite the cap hit, will probably cost the Jets less in the long run than Lamar Jackson. Now, granted, Lamar Jackson also is a younger quarterback, and you have the potential to have him for a longer time. But the amount of draft capital you would have to give up to get Aaron Rodgers will be significantly less than Lamar Jackson. Even if we get to the point Lamar Jackson gets traded, and I don't think he will at this point because they're letting him in the hiring process for the offensive coordinator. And I just feel like the Ravens, especially now with Burrow going back-to-back AFC Championship games and getting to one Super Bowl, it's going to be awfully hard to move off of Lamar Jackson. So with Aaron Rodgers, I do think it's going to cost you a first-round pick. The question is, how do you finagle it? If I was the Jets personally, I would do everything I can to trade the first-round pick next year. Now, there's obviously risk involved. As we've seen, you don't know what's going to happen. You assume that the Jets are going to be good with Aaron Rodgers. You assume that they're going to be in the playoffs, which makes it a late first-round pick. But if things go wrong, that could be a very high draft pick, like we saw with Denver. I mean, there's a reason Seattle's going to be picking top 5 this year. It's because of Denver's woes this year, and they have that first-round pick. But the reason I would be hesitant to trade the first-round pick this year is because while the Jets have a very good roster, while the Jets have a lot of exciting young pieces, I don't think they are a complete team. And the biggest need that you would have is the offensive line. And you would likely have to use that first-round pick to get an offensive lineman or trade back, get a couple of assets, and still take a first lineman later in the first round. So for the Jets, I'm curious to see what the compensation would be. I really do not think it's going to be 2 number 1 picks. And I do think Aaron's going to dictate where he wants to go. And there's only, to me, 2 legitimate contenders to get Aaron Rodgers. The first is the Dolphins. But out of the 2, I think they're the less likely because it seems like they're going to go back with Tua. They don't have the draft capital to really pull off a trade at this point. And also, you haven't heard a lot of the connections there. The 2 teams I think it will come down to will be the Tennessee Titans and the Jets. The Titans are a funny team because I feel the Jets have the better weaponry at wide receiver. But the Titans right now probably have a slightly better overall offensive line. They have a more veteran coach, and also they have Derrick Henry. And I love Breece Hall, but Derrick Henry is probably a more reliable running back at this point than Breece Hall. And I know I'm going to get a lot of hate for that, but it's true. The thing, too, with the Titans that I'm curious with Rodgers is, does he look at that division as a very winnable division? I mean, don't forget the Jaguars won that division with 9 wins this year. So even with Rodgers on the Jets, it will be hard because Buffalo, even though I think they're coming back down to earth a little bit, will still be a hard team to get over in the AFC East. But with all that being said, the AFC Championship game gave clarity, and it gave clarity in these playoffs. Like, you look at the big 4 teams in the AFC, look at the quarterbacks, Josh Allen, Joe Burrow, and Patrick Mahomes. I mean, when we talk about the top 3 quarterbacks in the AFC, it's usually those 3 guys. And look at where they finished up this year. And the 2 top guys, we believe, Burrow and Mahomes, were in the championship game, and Mahomes is going to the Super Bowl. So if the Jets look, first of all, the Jets, as a Jet fan, I just want to see this team end the freaking playoff drought. But if this team wants to legitimately win a Super Bowl, I feel like you're going to have to get Aaron Rodgers. And the funny thing with Derek Carr is, I wonder if a part of him doesn't want to go to the AFC and wants to go to the NFC. Because I look at the NFC right now, if you're Derek Carr, could I make the case that if Derek Carr goes to the NFC, especially if Rodgers goes to an AFC team, because I don't think the Packers are going to trade him in the NFC, I think I can make a case that Derek Carr is a top 3 quarterback in the NFC. Like, I laugh and look, the Eagles are a good team and a talented team, but I put this out on social media last night, and I said, has any team gotten an easier road in terms of the quarterbacks they played in the Philadelphia Eagles? They got Daniel Jones, and they got Brock Purdy, and Josh Johnson were hurt, who were basically the 3rd and 4th quarterbacks for the San Francisco 49ers. I mean, you look around the NFC, Dak, Jalen Hurts probably is the best quarterback in that right now. I just look around the NFC. Like, if I put Derek Carr on the Carolina Panthers with that young roster, could they easily roll through the NFC South and get one of the top 2 seeds in the NFL? I could easily see that. I mean, in the NFC, I could easily see that. I just look like, if you're Derek Carr, you could be a king in the NFC. You could be the big fish in the small pond, where if you put Derek Carr in the AFC, he's not the best quarterback in the AFC East. He's not a top 5 quarterback in the AFC. And I would legitimately ask this question: is Derek Carr a top 7 out of the playoff spots? Is he a top 7 quarterback? I feel like you'd put Herbert in front of him. You would put Lamar Jackson in front of him. You'd put Burrow and Mahomes in front of him. You'd put Josh Allen in front of him. Trevor Lawrence, talent-wise, but I think as of now, you'd probably, but it'd be close. And then I just look at basically, Tua played like an MVP candidate when he was healthy. I mean, there's so many quarterbacks in the AFC, and that's part of the problem with the Jets is I like Derek Carr. I think he can get them to the playoffs, but would be a first-round exit. Would the Jets, do you feel confident with Derek Carr going to Arrowhead, going on the road to Cincinnati, going on the road in Buffalo? You had Aaron Rodgers, you would feel a lot better. And I get the notion of you don't want the Jets to sacrifice for the future. I get that. But we need to end this playoff drought, and you need to change the perception of this organization. And sorry about that. The biggest thing I look at with the Jets, they have to figure it out later. And first, the other thing, too, is drafting quarterbacks hasn't worked. They've wasted the 2nd and 3rd picks in the draft on quarterbacks. And at this point with the Jets, just figure it out. Could the Jets look at a possibility of, this is just spitballing out there, but let's say they trade for Rodgers. Let's say they had to trade this year's first-round pick, but they were able to keep the 2nd and 3rds this year. Okay. I'm sorry about that. Could the Jets draft a quarterback in the 2nd or 3rd round, develop him like the Eagles did with Jalen Hurts? I mean, that seems like a smart thing. Like, I really like the kid McGee from Stanford. I think he's going to be a really good quarterback, but he is someone that needs to sit on the bench. Could that be a possibility? And look, for Rodgers, I know that you worry about him getting pissed, but the biggest thing, though, is number one, you're not drafting a quarterback in the 1st round. And number two, you know that this is a short-term, like 1 or 2 year thing. Like, you pretty much know that with this Jet team. And look, I know the headlines would be splashy. Like, Rodgers would be the popular splashy pick. He'd be the big headline trade for the Jets. And I understand there's still a lot of people that want Lamar. And look, I would love Lamar here, but the problem I see with Lamar is how much it's going to take to get Lamar. And I'm not sure he'd be a great fit for this offense right now, where, Aaron Rodgers had success with Hackett. They've had success in the system. And even at his worst last year, 26 touchdowns, that would still be the 3rd best passing season in Jets history. I mean, the Jets, let's throw this out there. The Jets haven't had a 20 touchdown passer in 7 years. Last one was Ryan Fitzpatrick. That's how bad it has been at the quarterback position. So I say you get Rodgers and you try to figure out a long-term plan over the next year or two. And look, Joe Douglas has also shown he's willing to move off of some veterans. He's been nifty on the trade market and acquiring draft picks. I still would feel a lot better than mortgaging everything to get Lamar Jackson and then basically having to pay Lamar Jackson. Not sure it's going to work in the system. And it just seems like when you look at the Jets rumors, it's really high Aaron Rodgers, and it almost feels like the backup plan or the plan B is Derek Carr. Like, I really feel like those are going to be the 2 guys that the Jets sell on, because Lamar's going to cost a lot. I don't think Aaron's going to cost you 2 first-round picks. He's going to cost you picks. But Lamar, I say the starting price is going to be Deshaun Watson, because Lamar's an MVP. Lamar has been fantastic, and Lamar doesn't have off-the-field issues. Yet, you look at the trade for Watson, he got, 3 first-round picks and a 3rd? So I think that that's where they start. Like, the Ravens look for 4 first-round picks. I mean, it's a lot, but I could easily see them sticking to that. And the biggest thing I look at, too, with this Jet team, you don't know how long windows are going to last. And the big reason why Rodgers makes sense financially now, outside of paying Quinn Williams this offseason, you're not really paying any of these young stars. Like, in 2 or 3 years when Rodgers moves on and you have to make a transition to a young quarterback or a rookie quarterback, that will help because at that point, you're going to probably have to pay Sauce. You're going to have to pay Breece Hall. You're going to have to pay AVT. You're going to have to pay certain guys. And in order to pay those guys and keep them on this roster, you need to be able to not pay a quarterback. So I think the timing would also work out a lot better with the contract with the Jets because this is only going to be basically a 2-year probably project. Like the biggest thing I'm curious with Aaron, and I'll get to your comments. I see them stacking up. With Aaron Rodgers, I really hope that he is motivated. I'm not saying that he wouldn't be motivated, but motivated to win a Super Bowl with the Jets. Like going all in, going the extra mile, because I am curious how he cares about his legacy. I do think he cares, but how much does it mean to him? Because if his legacy means a lot to Aaron, winning a Super Bowl with the Jets, I think would help him stick in that upper echelon of quarterbacks that we talk about as historically great. The problem for Rodgers is two things. The first thing is he's only got one Lombardi in the case. And when we look back, we're going to say Aaron Rodgers was the most talented, physically gifted quarterback in the NFL for about a decade, but he only had one Super Bowl trophy. And the other problem kind of builds into that, where Aaron's kind of the fallback argument was, well, he was so talented, he was so great during his time period. There's a little bit of an elephant in the room now, where now we have Patrick Mahomes, who's the most gifted and talented quarterback we've seen this decade. The difference is he's going to his third Super Bowl, where Aaron's only been to one. He has a chance to get that second ring at this point in his young career. Aaron's only got one. And as great as Aaron is, it's kind of hard when you look back and you go, okay, Aaron's got one Super Bowl, but Eli's won 2, Peyton's won 2, Mahomes will likely win potentially 2. Like you go down the list and all of a sudden you're like, if Aaron's really that great, how does he only have one Lombardi? And the other thing too is the legacy of winning in New York. Because if Aaron Rodgers was somehow the quarterback to end the Jets' drought and just getting to a Super Bowl, especially if they won, but just getting to the Super Bowl, where the Jets haven't been since 1968, and he's the one that brings the Lombardi trophy, that will greatly impact his legacy. Because when you win in New York, it changes everything. It changes how people view you. It changes how you are ranked among the greatest. And I know a lot of people outside of New York just don't get why, but you look at the difference winning in New York is. Eli Manning won 2 Super Bowls in New York. He will be a legend for that. And despite really, when you look back at Eli's career, was Eli really that great? No, he was good, but he really wasn't great. But he's probably going to get a Hall of Fame out of that. The other thing, too, is you look at certain athletes that have great careers, but their most defining moment happened in New York. I think a great example in hockey is Mark Messier. Mark Messier won multiple Stanley Cups with the Edmonton Oilers. But when you say Mark Messier, you know what's the first image that they play about Mark Messier? What's the first thing that comes to mind? It's him holding up the Stanley Cup with the New York Rangers. Like that impact it had on his career cannot be understated. You look basically around how New York has helped elevate legacies of players. If Aaron Rodgers were to come in and pull the Tom Brady and win relatively quickly with a new team, winning a Super Bowl with another franchise, and really a franchise that has been arguably outside of maybe the Bears, had the least successful quarterbacking in the NFL since they won a Super Bowl, and actually get the Jets over the hump, that would greatly help his legacy. But it's curious, like, because Aaron Rodgers funny. Like, he's a funny guy to read, but overall, if the Jets want to compete, they can get Derek Carr. They can still be competitive. They can still get to the playoffs and heck, maybe win a playoff game. But if this team really wants to win a Super Bowl, you feel a lot better with Aaron Rodgers going against Burrow, Mahomes, and Allen than you do with Carr. And look, I'm saying that I still would love Carr. I would not be upset if this team got Derek Carr. I think Derek Carr is an underrated quarterback and a very good quarterback. But I'm just looking at if this team wants to get to a Super Bowl, it's got to be Aaron Rodgers. And look, I agree with Finger Lakes Jet fan. They're a playoff team with either regardless, but you feel that basically Rodgers is the better option to get you to the Super Bowl. Mahomes is going to the Super Bowl for the third time, and Carr is good, but will not be able to outdo Mahomes in Kansas City. Rodgers is the only one that can duel Mahomes and Burrow. Like, again, Dave Dew, I think you hit around the head. Like, you feel good with Carr. Like, if you're on the road in Jacksonville against Trevor Lawrence, you feel fine with Carr if you had to go to New England on the road. You feel fine with Carr going to a couple different places in the AFC. Heck, I think you'd even feel pretty comfortable with Carr against Buffalo. I think Buffalo, I think the flowers are starting to come off a little bit about how much everyone's pretty much anointed them. But the two biggest elephants in the room are, can you go to Cincinnati with Carr and can you go to Kansas City with Carr and win? And well, I think it would be interesting. I don't feel confident with that right now. Old Parson had a good mock draft and volunteer trade for Rodgers. Second, Corey Davis, next year's first for Rodgers and their fourth this year. The thing with Corey Davis is, and again, I know the Packers were interested in trade for Corey Davis. The problem is they have Christian Watson emerging, and they're going to have Jordan Love next year. I think with Davis is more getting him in there for Aaron. And the other thing too is he's probably going to be a cap casualty. If you're the Packers, realistically, the Jets are likely going to cut Corey Davis. Would you rather wait until the Jets cut Corey Davis and then sign him as opposed to then and get an extra draft pick? Like, to me, I like that idea. If they really want Corey Davis that bad, go for it. Another piece I'd be interesting too. Now, again, I don't think it really fits their defense because they're more of a 3-4 front. If they would like Carl Lawson, if that's something to throw in the trade, their cornerback room's really good, so I don't think Bryce Hall would really help. But I mean, if Corey Davis can help you negate a draft pick, I'm all for it, but I just don't see the Packers doing that. I just really don't. Braden, I just don't want Jimmy G. I get it. I think a lot of the Jimmy G luster has fallen around the Jets fans. And look, I don't think Jimmy G, like the Jets, would be his number one choice, especially with LaFleur gone. But the other thing, too, with Jimmy G, interestingly enough, first of all, I don't trust his health. The second thing, though, is with Jimmy G, I think that there's two better options already for Jimmy G than the Jets. I think the first is the Raiders. He's played with McDaniels. He's had success with McDaniels. And look, I think the Raiders are going to likely draft a quarterback, but Jimmy G would be the starter next year. And he doesn't have to go anywhere, and it's in a glitz and glam city of Las Vegas. I think he'd like that. The other's New England. I really think Jimmy G is going to end up back in New England because, like with the Rodgers trade, certain parties want to get information out. And in New England, it's funny how all of a sudden a lot of articles coming about how Belichick's almost doing some of these moves to spite Robert Kraft over the past week, that he's not happy with Robert Kraft and how basically Kraft overruled him to keep Brady forever. What would be the ultimate middle finger if Bill's really this vindictive? Would be to bring the quarterback back that you made me trade. I could see that working. And look, Mac Jones, yes, they invested a first-round pick in him, but they didn't trade up. They didn't use any other assets. And look, he was the 15th pick in the draft. And it's clear that there was a lot of disagreement between the staff. They brought back Bill O'Brien. Well, Bill O'Brien was the OC there when Jimmy G was there. I'm just saying, everyone keeps saying like Jimmy G, the Jets a little bit. If I had to bet, I really believe that Jimmy G is going to be a Patriot next year because the Patriots haven't been in the playoffs in 3 years. And it almost feels like Bill is just kind of trolling Robert Kraft at this point. What would be the ultimate troll job for Belichick? It would be bringing the quarterback back that he was forced to trade and getting back into the postseason with that quarterback. That would be the ultimate. Carr going in Atlanta doesn't matter. Is not the guy. Like, let's put it this way, Dave. He can go the whole NFC South. I mean, Brady's likely leaving Tampa, so Tampa needs a quarterback. The Saints need a quarterback. Like, all those teams in the NFC South need a quarterback. And if you put Carr on on any of those teams, I think they instantly become the favorite to win the South. I really do. I think Carr should end up with the Panthers or Atlanta. I think Panthers are better because they have the better coach with Frank Wright in terms of the offense, who's established himself offensively. You have an owner that's willing to be aggressive and get these pieces. And the other thing, too, is the Panthers have a lot of draft capital. Although the one thing I would say about the Panthers, and I've talked about this at my other job, and I can do, if you guys want, I can do general NFL draft talk if you would like later this week. But I have a bit of a theory where they have an idea of what they're going to do at quarterback over in Carolina. I don't know if it's Carr. It might be. I have a feeling that Carolina could trade up for the first pick in the draft. And people will say, oh, that's crazy. They have the 9th pick in the draft. Well, they've also traded 3 picks for Sam Darnold, 3 picks for Baker Mayfield. And what did they do with Christian McCaffrey? Oh, that's right. They have 2 2s and 2 3s this year. Bears need a lot of players and a lot of bodies. If Carolina came to them and said, we'll give you 9, we'll give you next year's 1, we'll give you both 2s and both 3s, be hard to turn down. I really think that they're going to say to Frank, pick your guy in this draft. Pick the quarterback you want. We're going to get up to number 1. We'll make it happen whatever way we can. Because the Panthers also have a pretty good young core. I mean, we forget they almost won the NFC South. I mean, they got rid of a terrible head coach. I personally, I think they should have kept Wilkes. I think Wilkes did a job and deserved to keep his job. But with Wilkes, they were a 6-6 football team with bad quarterback play. You get a good quarterback in there. They have a good young defensive front. They have some nice skill positions. I mean, they're not great really anywhere, but they have a solid roster all around. Like, they don't have a real big weakness. Let's see. I'm just worried about on the road in the playoffs, not worried about Mahomes, Burrow, Allen. Yeah. Give Zach a chance. That's not happening. Look, Zach, the problem with Zach is they're going to have to make a decision on his 5th-year option. Look, if you really care about Zach, Rodgers is probably the best guy. Like, he idolizes Aaron Rodgers, and that'd probably be the one quarterback Zach would be happy to sit behind because he gets to watch and learn from his idol. Now, I'm not saying Rodgers is going to be a mentor, but they do have a good friendship. And of all the quarterbacks that come in and not rock the boat, and look, if Aaron Rodgers comes in and the Jets have to stick with Zach Wilson on the bench for 2 years, they have playoff success with Aaron Rodgers, but Rodgers decides to retire after 2 years, and then they give Zach one more chance. At that point, I'd be fine with it because you've already gotten to the playoffs. You've already established yourself. See what you got in Zach. See if you can do anything with it. But I almost feel like that would be the best thing, too. And that's the other thing, Frank, like I mentioned the 20. We haven't had a 10 TD passer in 3 years. So everyone's saying Rodgers wouldn't be an upgrade. Even if Rodgers on the decline, last year was his worst season, and he played with the broken thumb, he still had 26 touchdowns. It would be by far and away the best season the Jets quarterbacks have in a long time. Yeah, I think it's got to get done before free agency because the Jets need to figure out the cap situation. It's going to be a massive hit. Like, this is going to get done sooner than later. Let's see. What's good is Rodgers and Sal is going to mess up. Yeah, we messed up. We made a mistake not cleaning house, replacing Sal with Reich. Sal is only a DC. Look, it's tough. I think it'd be hard to replace a head coach with a fired head coach. So I just get this feeling, too, that with Reich, personally, I wouldn't mind it. I don't, Kev, like, if you told me the Jets are that sold on Reich that they'd fire Sal. I mean, I like Sal a lot. I think there's a lot of things I like about him, but I also like the fact that he fessed up that, look, he made a mistake on the offensive side of the ball and he got an experienced play caller. And even if the Jets don't get Derek Carr, look, Nathaniel Hackett has proven he can call offensive plays. He's had experience as an OC. Like, Saleh at least understands his shortcomings and has shown an ability to adapt. Now, again, the clock management needs to be better. There's still fault with him, but we also got to look at the defense going from one of the worst in the NFL, actually the worst in the NFL, to one of the best. And I have seen players progress under him. So let's see how that goes. Rodgers or bust from good old Snoopy. I just don't see Carr Jimmy competing and defeating Holmes and Burrow. So Jimmy G, no. I could see Carr going it down because the Jets have had Allen's number the last 2 times. And Allen, if you've noticed, the further he gets away from Dable, the biggest warts of his game start coming out, which is lack of ball security and lack of, enforcing the turnovers. And look, here's the thing with Buffalo now. They're in a tough spot because now they're paying Allen. Now they're going to have to be really good in the draft. The problem now they run into is they've been trying to rebuild the offensive line for years. That hasn't worked. They've lost Joe Shane, who was a big part of that front office. This is a big offseason for them. And when I look at it, Buffalo has some big holes. Von Miller's going to be coming back from a major injury and likely going to miss the beginning of the season. You have a team that, for whatever reason, refuses to invest in a running back. Will they finally get a running back for Josh Allen? Because as much as I love Josh Allen's talent, is he going to be one of these guys that's great for a shorter period of time like an Andrew Luck because he's been taking so much physical abuse and punishment? Like even with Lamar, as much as he runs, he still has a reliable running game, or at least backs he can hand off to in Baltimore, and he at least has a decent offensive line. There's a lot, and here's the other thing. What's going on with Stephon Diggs? Like, I have no problem with him being frustrated, but Diggs has also shown you that if it's not going well with the quarterback, he's not afraid to ask to get out. So I don't think that's going to happen. But really, outside of Diggs, I don't think they have a great receiving core. Like, I don't think Buffalo, like, I look at Kansas City, much better roster and team. I look at the Bengals, much better roster and team. I look at the Bills, as great as Josh Allen is, there's a lot of holes on that roster. Hasn't dominated the league. Yeah. Reich, I think, is a good coach. That's going to be interesting if he can get the right quarterback. I don't think he never had the right quarterback in Indianapolis. And you saw the difference when he wasn't there compared to when they had Jeff Saturday. But look, I think that Saleh has an opportunity here. Atlanta has the offensive weapons and $70 million in cap space. Well, they have Kyle Pitts and Drake London. They don't have a really good offensive line, though. Like Atlanta, I could see getting into it a little bit. Like I said, if Carr goes to any team in the NFC South, they'll be the clear favorite to win that division. Frank Wentz, and that worked out so well for him in Indy. It did not work out. I'm also curious, too, if it was more the GM that wanted Wentz, though. And to be fair, though, let me go off on a little bit of a tangent here. The Colts are a weird team because we all kill Carson Wentz, but he actually was pretty good in Indianapolis that year. It's just that last game, I've never seen an organization, like the Jets at least reacted after a 6-game slide. The Colts, the way they have acted since that Jacksonville loss last year, it has just spiraled since that loss because Irsay's gotten more involved and has made some rash decisions. They've brought in Jeff Saturday to be a head coach and from being an analyst. And they went into the season with Matt Ryan, who looked shot as a quarterback in Atlanta and basically didn't have a good backup plan for when Matt Ryan would ultimately fail. And like people like, I think that's a little bit of a lazy argument. Again, that was a horrendous loss to a bad Jacksonville team. But for whatever reason, that franchise has struggled playing in Jacksonville. But for Carson Wentz, like people are like, oh my God, Carson Wentz was awful. And look, in that last game, he was. Did he cost them the season in that last game? Probably. But people are killing him for being, oh, he was awful. Oh, he's awful. That last season in Indy, 3,500 yards, 27 TDs, 62% completion percentage, only 7 interceptions. People are like, oh my God, he was god awful. If the Jets had 2021 Carson Wentz, they'd be in the freaking playoffs this year. So, like, again, like I think Frank Reich gets a little bit too much grief for that decision. Let's see. We had the worst QB play for 2 years. Let's see how he does with an actual OC and a good QB. Like, that's the other thing. The Jets had the worst quarterback situation in the NFL. That's just well, come on, guys. We're all family here. Come on, man. All right, let's get back to the program, guys. Let's clean it up a little bit. But look, I think if you put Rodgers on this team, that this is a Super Bowl caliber team. And the thing with this, too, is I do think this defense is great. And really the only person this team's going to have to pay outside of Rodgers is Quinn Williams over the next 2 years. I mean, they don't have any massive or bad contracts that are going to hurt this team. I mean, the Jets have the capital. And there's the other thing, too, like for people worried about a trade. Joe Douglas, again, I understand that there are Jet fans that don't like Joe Douglas. I really like Joe Douglas. Now, can you say Joe Douglas has been great in free agency? You can make that argument. Yeah, he could be better in free agency. Could he have been better in that first draft? Yes. But the last 2 drafts have been really good. And the biggest thing with Douglas is the Jets, in every trade they have made, you'd never feel they lost the trade or they gave up too much. In most cases, you feel the Jets had a steal. Joe Douglas is very good with his draft pick management and valuation in trades. I don't think that the Jets are going to get swindled if they trade for Aaron Rodgers. Now, will they be creative? Like for, let's say, instead of 2 1s, could it be this year's 1, next year's second rounder? But if the Jets make it the Super Bowl, it's a conditional where they give up a first round pick. And look, if the Jets made the Super Bowl next year and had to change, basically move off the second round pick and make that into a first round pick where it's in the late 30s anyway, I'm okay with that. I think the Jets will be creative. And the other thing, too, is if the Jets do lose draft picks because of these trades, I could see Joe Douglas getting creative. Can he move off of a veteran? Is there someone on this roster that he can get good value for? Like, for example, Bryce Hall. Could he maybe get like a 4th or 5th rounder back for him if they somehow keep the 13th pick this year and they trade, let's say, the 2nd round pick and the 4th round pick this year, or the 2nd and 3rd this year? Could the Jets be creative from 13 and trade back to get more picks? Like, because the other thing, too, with Rodgers, I don't think Green Bay's going to want to get pieces back from him, obviously. But I also think Rodgers is also not going to have the team he's going to not have draft picks because he wants to be successful. And he knows with his contract, yeah, you can get some veteran receivers in here and a veteran player or 2 on like a league minimum to come play for the Jets. But your big additions are going to have to be through the draft. And I don't think Rodgers is going to want to go to a place that doesn't have draft capital over the next 2 years. And in some regards, I think the Packers would want the 13th pick this year because if the Jets are good next year, that first round pick is going to be a late first round pick. At least at the 13th pick in the draft, they have a lot of options. They can trade and get into the top 10. Another possibility, too, is could they draft a quarterback at 13? I don't think they're fully sold on Jordan Love. If they were, I think they would have moved off Rodgers a long time ago. But here's something I don't think people are thinking about. Anthony Richardson, I feel, is the most intriguing prospect in this draft. Would it be out of the realm of possibility that maybe they give Love the 5th year option just to have it, and they start the year with Jordan Love and they put Richardson on the bench, and then next year Richardson's ready to go? That could be a possibility. Could Love play his way into being a competitive starter and they figured out the quarterback and they have a trade piece in Richardson? Absolutely. Could they still get enough out of Love where, okay, we still love Richardson more long-term, but Love played himself into at least being a trade piece? There's a lot of ways that they can go about this for Green Bay. Could Green Bay really want the first pick next year? Maybe that's what they more covet because they want to have the ammo to go up and maybe get, like, let's say, Caleb Williams or one of the top quarterbacks in next year's draft. That could also be a possibility. Could they do kind of what the Eagles did this year, which was hedge their bets? Like last year, I said the Eagles won the draft because they got a first-round pick for this draft. And I said that was crucial because if the Eagles went into next year and Jalen Hurts wasn't the answer, and he has been the answer, they've at least hedged their bets where it's like, okay, we have 2 first-round picks. We can go up and get a quarterback. Maybe that's what the Packers feel. They give Jordan Love a chance this year, but they get the Jets' first-round pick next year. So if they're in the draft and they're sitting there and they're a bad team and they have a top 5 pick or a top 3 pick, but they want number 1, well, they can throw the Jets pick in there as extra compensation to go up all the way to 1. So a lot of it depends on what the Jets and the Packers decide to do, but I don't think it's going to cost as much. And as much as I love Lamar Jackson, and Lamar would probably be my number 2 choice, the amount the Jets would have to A, pay, and B, trade to get him, I don't think it's worth it. If Lamar hits the market, there's going to be a lot more teams interested in them with Rodgers. And like I've been saying, start with 3 first-round picks. That's the starting point. Could Tepper in Carolina say, screw it, I'll give up 4 first-round picks? Like, I could legitimately see Lamar Jackson being that first quarterback where we get 4 first-round picks. It's a lot, but I could see it. Maybe there's a team that has 2 first-round picks this year that uses both, and basically it's not 4 years worth of draft picks, it's still 3, but they still get 4 first-rounders. Like, I think that's the starting point for Lamar. I really do. Kev, can we have White as QB2 with Rodgers or Carr? Yes, they proved backup is as important as QB1. Look, and I think that's part of the reason why I don't think Mike White is going to be here, is because of how valuable the backup quarterback position. I think there's going to be a decent market for White in free agency. I really do. I really think that there's going to be a couple of teams that are going to want White. And I feel like there's a couple of teams, like I could see 2 teams I think to really keep an eye on with Mike White are Houston and Arizona. Houston's going to draft a quarterback, but they could have at least Mike White there to start the first couple of games until the rookie is ready. And Arizona, I mean, they're committed to Kyler Murray, but Kyler Murray's probably not going to be back right away, and you want to ease him into next season coming off the ACL. And for Mike White, it's a great place because he gets a couple opportunities to start in Arizona. Like, those are a couple teams. And if you're Mike White and you've had some success in the NFL and you want an opportunity to start, unfortunately, if the Jets trade for Aaron Rodgers, you're not going to get a chance to start. If you go to Houston, you have a chance to start. If you go to Arizona, you're going to probably start the season in some capacity. If you go to a team with a very injured quarterback, like heck, let's say Garoppolo goes to the Raiders. Mike White might want to go to the Raiders because he's like, well, history has shown Garoppolo's probably going to get hurt in the first 2 months of the season, so I'll have an opportunity to play. JD is a fine GM. Every GM has a crummy track record. Even Howie Roseman made bad drafts. Yeah, like no GM's bats 1,000, dude. Yeah, once the quarterback is fixed, everything comes to place. And look, I agree. And thanks, Andrew. Definitely hit that like and that subscribe button. And the other thing too is with this, Dave the dude. Dave, the Browns gave up 3 first rounders and a third to get Deshaun Watson, who, let me remind you, has never been an MVP, has a lengthy injury issue, has torn his ACL twice, has, sat out an entire season, quit on his team. And, oh, by the way, a little bit of an elephant in the room, just had 30 charges of being a sexual pervert. Yeah. And Lamar, meanwhile, has been an MVP, been in the postseason, and has the best winning percentage of any quarterback in his draft class. Yeah, I could see a team give up 4 first rounders. I easily could. Because that was the market for Deshaun. Lamar's a better quarterback, a safer, and someone you can trust. Like, Deshaun Watson, for all we know this summer, could get in trouble again because he's got a shady past off the field. And that's the thing, too. I think that this team, because Zach's under contract, they're not going to trade it. They're going to have Zach behind Aaron Rodgers. And Aaron Rodgers plays a lot. And I do think White's going to get a decent deal on the market. I really do. If we get Aaron, then as backups, we have Zach and Shreve. Well, I think Shreve's going to be, if he's back, he'll be the practice squad. And look, you feel better about Zach being the backup. And look, Zach has a great relationship with Aaron. I think that could be beneficial for both. And maybe 2 years down the line, Zach's finally ready to take over. The Jets give him a 1-year prove-it contract. Maybe that's the end game. But I feel a lot better going to season with Zach, with Aaron Rodgers and his health. And if Zach has to start a game or two, look, I don't hate it. He's still under contract. It's a guaranteed contract. Like, he's not going anywhere. The only way Zach Wilson leaves New York is if someone calls and gives the Jets a ridiculous offer. Like, that's the thing. Like, that's the only way I see that happening. And I personally don't see any team doing that. I really don't. Yeah, it's not working out for them, but they still did it. So I could see a team doing that for Lamar. With concussion protocol and D, focus on attacking. That's the thing I hate. I wish the NFL would allow you to dress 53 or 55. But because the NFL, I believe the number is 47 or 48, you're only allowed to dress so many bodies. And that's the thing I hate about the NFL. Like, with all the injuries we've seen, like, just expand the rosters to either 55 or you can dress 55 on game day. I know the NFL doesn't want to do it, but you saw the salary cap jumped up another $16 million this year. Just have more people. Like, the worst thing you can see is a team without a quarterback or a team that basically can't finish a game because they don't have enough healthy people. Like, and we've seen a couple of those over the last couple of years. You saw it yesterday. That was a bad look. Like, dress 3 quarterbacks, but teams can't because of how limited the roster space is. So I just could see, I do agree with you, Kev, that they should do that. Lamar is not a better thrower than Watson. Maybe, but I think overall his game's still better. Like, and look, Lamar's won an MVP. Lamar's gotten to the playoffs more consistently. And Deshaun, and despite like the injuries Lamar's had, Deshaun's had more major injuries in his career. Yeah, he'll be the backup. He's not going to be the starter. The Jets are not exploring the veteran market. Like, Zach's going to be the backup. Let's be honest. Yeah, and Zach Wilson, like, we forget, still had a winning record with this team this year. Like, if Zach has to come in for a game or two, I don't think the Jets are killed. I don't think that the Jets are completely hurt. And look, the other thing too is you have Nathaniel Hackett now, who's an experienced play caller and has, let's be honest, worked with quarterbacks that aren't great. He's worked with Kyle Orton and almost got the Bills to the playoffs. He's worked with Blake Bortles and got them to an AFC Championship game. I mean, Hackett has a track record where he can deal with, let's just say, not the primest cuts of meat at the quarterback position. What was the salary cap? I can get you. Let me get you the exact number so I'm not talking. Let's see. So it's a $16.5 million increase. So the salary cap will be it's now every year it's a record high, but it's going to be $224.8 million this year, according to Ian Rappaport. That's up from $208.2 million from last year. Now, I'm not exactly sure exactly how that works. I'm just looking about how it impacts the Jets. So for the Jets, with their cap situation, I think a lot of them were basing the cap to be 225. So it's right around there technically. The Jets are still over the cap because, again, a lot of the contracts are based going into next season. They usually go up a little bit every year. So the Jets are technically minus $200 million in cap space. And look, well, that sounds bad. Technically, the Jets are going to be able to get up to potential cap space. They're still projected to have pretty good cap space. The other thing, too, is they can unload a couple or renegotiate the contract. The CJ Mosley one's going to be the big one, obviously. If they can renegotiate that, that's going to open up some space. Probably cut Corey Davis. There's a couple of guys they can cut and not really get any cap penalty. So I don't think that'll be a big issue. Yeah, 224.8. I don't think I want to run. Look, I get it. I don't necessarily want a running quarterback, too. And that's the thing I worry about Lamar is his long-term health. But that's the other reason why I like Rodgers better than Lamar. And if I'm honest, I'd probably prefer Carr over Lamar because at least with Carr, you know he's durable. You know he's going to start. And the other big thing with Carr is because I don't have to pay him as much or give up nearly the capital again, I can put a better roster around Carr. So if I had to do my power rankings of quarterbacks, it would be Rodgers 1, Carr 2, Jackson 3. But the reason Jackson, I think the Jets would rather have Jackson than Carr, though, is like I've been saying, you feel better with Lamar Jackson going into Arrowhead and going into Cincinnati than you would with Carr. That's the biggest difference. But I get a lot of people have said that running quarterbacks don't last, and I agree with that. Rodgers said himself, "You can't throw in the pocket in this league. You're not going to win the playoffs." The thing with Rodgers, though, and I'm curious to see what the Jets do in the offensive line. I don't think the Jets want to give up the 13th pick because they need an offensive lineman. And I laughed, too, because I saw Kuiper's mock draft. And look, I like Kuiper. I like how he evaluates the prospects. I don't love his mock drafts. Like his first mock draft had the Jets taking the wide receiver at Ohio State. He's not even the number one receiver on my board. And number two, I'm like, you got to do a little bit of research on the team. The Jets went through 6 tackles last year. The Jets are not going to go into a season, especially because the free agency market and with their cap space isn't going to be great. The Jets, unless the Jets come out and say, we are moving Elijah Vera Tucker to left tackle. I mean, they're already hinting Mekhi Becton at left tackle. Okay. So I think in a perfect world, Dwayne Brown comes back, Mekhi comes back. Mekhi tries to start the season left tackle. If he can't go, at least you have Dwayne Brown as a solid backup. But right tackle, I like Max Mitchell a lot, but you can't tell me you're going into a season with Max Mitchell and Mekhi Becton as your starting left and right tackles. You just can't. So I just feel like the Jets, they're going to draft an offensive lineman. Maybe they create and draft a guard so they can move AVT. But this offensive line is still going to need a lot of work. And if you trade all these assets for Rodgers, you're not going to be able to address them in the draft. Yeah, I think the biggest thing is Mosley's the hardest contract because he's got the biggest cap hit. And thanks, McCagnon. And look, I think it's beneficial for both. The Jets need to open up cap space. CJ's never going to get close to what the Jets are paying him. So I think it's best for both parties. I think Freedom House, you actually put this the best way I can put this. Carr is the safest option, but I'd rather have Rodgers because we are historically bad with QB, so I want an elite QB. Carr to me is the safe choice. Carr to me is the safe choice where it's like, okay, we can get to the playoffs, we can end the playoff drought, and we can be stable. And to be fair, you can win. We've seen San Francisco do it for years. You can win with just solid quarterback play in that system. You don't need to be elite. But the biggest problem, though, is San Francisco has the benefit of playing in the NFC. The NFC has nowhere near the quarterbacking prowess that the AFC does. It would be curious, like, look, San Francisco's had a lot of great success, but with okay quarterback play. But if you put them in the AFC, would they'd still be a really good team, but would they be the same? I don't know. And look, you'd feel a lot better with Rodgers. I'll take Lamar over Rodgers. Like, look, in a vacuum, Jets gang, I would too. But there's a big problem though with that, which is there's so many steps with Lamar to even get to that point. And if you got to that point, how much it would cost. I mean, the Packers are basically hinting, and they're dropping pretty strong hints. Look, we're looking to trade Rodgers. We're just looking to restart. We're looking to reboot. We're looking to start over. The Ravens keep saying, we want to make it work with Lamar. We fired our OC, and Lamar's going to be a big part of the OC discussion. So you're telling me that they're letting the quarterback handpick the OC. So first of all, it's got to go from basically Lamar doesn't like the OC or picks the OC and then still doesn't want to be there. Like, it has to go from no contract negotiation to franchise tag to refusing to play on the franchise tag. Like, there's so many steps to even get to the point with trading where the Ravens will even look to trade Lamar. Right now the Packers are pretty dropping strong heads. Hey, we're probably moving off. Kyron picking wide receivers is just for clicks. He'll give a true mock draft today before the draft. Hey, all my mock drafts are true. I had the Jets taking 2 offensive linemen in my last mock draft. So if you haven't seen that, go check it out. So, yeah. If Rodgers comes here, he shouldn't. Yeah, they've already. Namath has already said like he would unretire 12. Like they would unretire 12 for him. Will not win the playoffs against Burrow, Mahomes. He will never beat those 2 guys. I will never say not never, but the thing, Lamar, I think a couple things have to be right. First of all, I think Lamar has to be pretty healthy. But look, I think that the Jets cost efficient wise too. And look, I think there's a better option. Like if the Jet, like for this staff, they need to get to the playoffs. This playoffs are bust. If they go on too long, like even worst case scenario, the Jets don't win the Super Bowl, but they make 2 long playoff runs with Rodgers and he decides he's done after 2 years. The Jets and this coaching staff has at least bought themselves some good faith and has given themselves more time to continue to build out this vision where they could maybe go back to Zach Wilson a year or 2 if he's been able to learn from Rodgers. Maybe they'll, at that point, have back their regular compensation and go get a quarterback in the rookie class. Like the thing with this coaching staff is like the Jets just need to prove that they're going in the right direction because the Jets have the longest playoff droughts potentially in professional sports if the Kings make the playoffs. They have not made the playoffs in 12 years. Like they need to just end that drought. And if they can for 2 years make 2 deep playoff runs and show the NFL that they have a good system, like for all we know, maybe in 2 years, if Rodgers decides to retire, there's another quarterback that wants to come to the Jets because, oh, they have great receivers, great offensive line, and they're this close to a Super Bowl. Like winning does so much for your culture, which is why this season, the way it ended, was infuriating because of the way it started. Like if the Jets won 9 games, made the playoffs, we would be having a completely different discussion about Robert Saleh. If the Jets snuck into the playoffs this year, we'd be talking extensions for Douglas. We'd be talking about extensions for Saleh. We'd be talking about a grace period for this quarterback position. Heck, it might be even more attractive for some of these quarterbacks that would want to come and play for the Jets. And look, Lamar is exciting, and Lamar is a great quarterback, but I just feel like Rodgers, it's not going to cost you nearly as much, and he gives you a better chance to win in the short future. Yeah, I think it's more than that. Look, I feel like it's just gotten to the point in that relationship where both parties are just like, look, we just need to move on. We need to change. But again, guys, those are my thoughts on Aaron Rodgers. I think the Jets need to be all in. And I think this is the best fit for Aaron of all the teams that he wants to go to. But we'll be back with more Jets content next week. Make sure you hit that subscribe button. Give us a like for the algorithm. We'll have more content. If you have any ideas for video or draft content, let me know in the chat. But until next time, I'm Nolan Rich, and this is Rich Sports Talk. We'll see you next time.